Hey everybody, welcome back to another deep dive with us. Today we're looking at Seth Godin's The Dip,
Yeah, the dip.
and it's all about quitting strategically to win.
Oh, yeah. Quitting to win. That's an interesting idea. It's kind of counterintuitive,
Yeah, I mean, we always think of quitting as this sort of like, terrible thing, a sign of weakness.
right? Like you're a failure if you quit.
Yeah, but Godin kind of turns this idea on its head and makes the argument that quitting strategically is actually essential for success.
Yeah, he's all about really focusing your energy on the things that matter.
Okay, so the main idea here is that there are two types of tough stretches we face in life, right?
hmm
There's the dips and there's the cul-de-sacs.
I love this analogy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really powerful. So
Um,
can you break down what the difference is between a dip and a cul-de-sac?
yeah, absolutely. So a dip, you can think of it like you're learning a new language or a musical instrument or you're starting a business.
Mm-hmm.
You're all gung-ho at the beginning, but then you hit this point where it gets really, really hard.
Oh.
And that's the dip. That's the point where a lot of people give up. But if you can push through that, you come out on the other side and you've mastered that skill.
You're ahead of the pack.
Exactly.
Okay, but like why is it so important to be the best at something? Like, I mean, wouldn't it be better just to be good at lots of different things?
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for being well-rounded. But if you want to make a real impact, you know,
Mm.
think about Zipf's law.
Oh, what is Zipf's law?
Yeah, it's this pattern that shows up all over the place in nature and economics, all sorts of things. And it basically says that the rewards for being number one are disproportionately greater.
So being the best pays off.
Big time. The number one search result on Google gets way more clicks than number two.
Right.
The top-selling book sells way more than the second bestseller. You know what I
So I
mean?
hear what you're saying.
So being at the top of your game isn't just about bragging rights. It's where the real impact and rewards are.
Okay, so how does this dip idea tie into becoming the best?
Because often pushing through that dip is what separates the best from the rest.
Hmm.
Think about those super competitive fields like getting a Supreme Court clerkship.
Oh, yeah.
Thousands of law students would love to have one of those,
Right.
but only a tiny fraction actually get them. And it's not because they're all geniuses. It's because they're the ones who didn't quit along the way.
I stuck with it.
Exactly. They stuck with it through all those years of law school, all those late nights studying. They pushed through the dip.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Yeah.
um, we've talked about the dips now. Tell me about the cul-de-sacs.
Okay. So a cul-de-sac, you can think of this as that dead-end job, the project that's going nowhere, the relationship that's just draining your energy.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is. And sometimes it's hard to admit to ourselves that we're in a cul-de-sac. But Godin argues that recognizing these situations and having the courage to quit is essential for success.
Okay, so dips, we got to stick with them. Cul-de-sacs, got to get out.
As soon as possible.
How do we know when we are in a cul-de-sac? Like what are some of the signs?
A really key question to ask yourself is, are you making any measurable progress?
Hmm.
If you're putting in the effort, but things aren't moving forward, that's a big red flag,
It's a warning sign.
right? It might be time to reassess and see if you're really on the right path.
Okay, so how does quitting the right things help us become the best in our world?
Well, think about it. You only have so much time and energy, right? So if you're wasting those resources on a cul-de-sac that's going nowhere,
Yeah.
you're not going to have anything left for those dips that actually matter.
So it's like running a race with a backpack full of rocks.
Exactly. Ditch the rocks, and you'll be amazed at how much faster you can run.
Love that analogy. Okay, so we've got the dip, we've got the
Mhm.
cul-de-sac, but what about those times when you get excited about something new and then it just kind of fizzles out? Like, is that considered quitting?
Yeah, Godin actually talks about different types of quitting. There's what he calls serial quitting, where you're constantly starting new things, but never sticking with anything long enough to get through the dip.
Ah, I see. So you're like always starting over.
Exactly. It's like switching lines at the supermarket checkout.
Yeah.
You think you're going to get ahead, but you just end up back where you started.
Oh, I've totally done that so many times.
We all have. And then there's reactive quitting, which is more impulsive.
Yeah.
You hit a snag and you just give up without really thinking it through.
It's like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. And then there's strategic quitting. This is the kind we're talking about today.
The good kind of quitting.
Exactly. It's about consciously deciding to leave those cul-de-sacs and free up your energy for those dips that really have the potential to take you to the next level.
This is like pruning a rose bush.
Yeah. You get rid of those dead branches so the healthy ones can flourish.
I like that. So strategic quitting is all about making those conscious choices about where to invest your energy.
And it's about recognizing that you deserve better than average
Right. It's not settling for mediocrity.
Exactly. It's about pushing yourself to become the best you can be.
I love it. Okay, so we've talked about the different types of quitting, but let's get real for a second. Why is it so hard to actually quit something?
Yeah, it's tough, even when we know logically that something is a cul-de-sac. To walk away.
Like what?
Well, there's the fear of failure,
Right.
right? We don't want to admit that we made a mistake or that we weren't good enough.
Right, there's that fear of judgment from other people.
Exactly. What will they think of us?
And then there's that sunk cost fallacy. You know,
Yeah.
we feel like we've already invested so much time and energy that we have to see it through even when it's not working.
It's like throwing good money after bad.
So how do we overcome these barriers? How do we become better quitters?
Well, Godin tells this really interesting story about Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah. I love his books.
Well, this guy, he went to Harvard Medical School, did his residency, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. So he was on track to be a doctor.
A top doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he realized somewhere along the way that he was miserable. He didn't want to spend his life doing something he didn't love.
So he quit medicine.
He did. He walked away from all of that training and became a writer, and he ended up writing some of the best-selling books of all time.
Wow. So sometimes quitting can lead to something even better.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to follow your heart, even when it means walking away from something you've invested a lot in.
That's super inspiring. Okay, so we've laid some groundwork here with these concepts of the dip, the cul-de-sac, and the different types of quitting.
Yeah.
Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how we can actually use these ideas to make smarter decisions in our own lives.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's dive into some specific strategies.
Awesome. We'll be right back after a quick break to unpack even more wisdom from Seth Godin's The Dip.
And we are back, deep diving into the dip with Seth Godin. It's really making me rethink my relationship with quitting.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how we're so conditioned to view it as like this negative thing? Totally. Yeah, it's like we're almost programmed to avoid it at all costs.
But Godin's whole point is that it can actually be this like incredibly powerful tool for success, you know?
Right, and he even talks about how companies exploit our fear of quitting.
Oh, yeah. Give me an example.
Well, like think about cigarettes, right? Like
Mhm.
they're designed to be addictive.
Ah, I see.
So the harder it is to quit, the more money the tobacco companies make.
It's true. And, you know, for most of us, it's not about like a physical addiction. It's more about the stories we tell ourselves, like the justifications we come up with to stay stuck in those cul-de-sacs.
It's like talking yourself into staying in a dead-end job.
Exactly. You're like, oh, it's not so bad. At least it's stable.
Right, or, you know, you pour hours into this project that's clearly going nowhere.
But you've already invested so much.
Yeah, you're like, I can't give up now.
The sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, exactly. So how do we break free from this mentality? How do we become better quitters?
Godin suggests something kind of radical. Decide in advance when you'll quit.
Wait, what, really?
Yeah. I know it sounds counterintuitive,
It does.
but setting those clear boundaries can actually give you more control, you know?
I guess if you wait until you're at that breaking point, you're more likely to make an emotional decision.
Right. And you might regret it later.
So it's about having a plan, a set of criteria.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like he gives the example of an ultra marathoner, you know, those people who run like crazy long distances.
Oh, yeah.
They'll often decide before the race, like what conditions would cause them to stop.
Makes sense.
That way they're not making the decision in the heat of the moment when they're exhausted and in pain.
They've thought it through.
Right. It's a strategic decision, not an emotional one.
So I guess it's not really about quitting altogether. It's about being smart about when and how you quit.
Exactly. And, you know, it doesn't mean giving up on your dreams altogether. It just means adjusting your approach,
Yeah.
you know, trying a new strategy.
Right. It's like you were saying before about the difference between tactics and strategy.
Exactly. You should always be willing to adjust your tactics, like your specific actions, but your overall strategy, your big picture goals should remain pretty stable.
So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
Keep the goal, but maybe change the approach.
You got it.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense. Now, what about that thing you mentioned earlier about serial quitting?
Oh, yeah. That's when you're constantly starting new things, but never sticking with anything long enough to see results.
Yeah, like you're always chasing the next shiny object.
Exactly. And Godin says it's like constantly switching lines at the supermarket. You think you're going to get ahead, but you just end up wasting time starting over.
Ugh, we hate when I do that.
We all do it. And it's because we think that the grass is always greener on the other side.
Right. But sometimes we just gotta stick it out.
Yeah, you got to push through that dip to see the rewards on the other side.
Okay, so we've talked about how to recognize when to quit and the importance of having a strategy. But what about those times when you've put in the effort, you've pushed through the dip, but it's still not working out?
That's a great question. And, it's important to remember that even the best quitters make mistakes sometimes.
We're human?
Exactly. We might misjudge a situation or overestimate our abilities, or circumstances might change. You know,
It happens.
so it's not about being perfect. It's about learning from those experiences and moving on.
So how do we deal with that feeling of disappointment when something doesn't work out?
This is where self-compassion comes in.
Okay.
Godin reminds us that it's okay to feel sad or disappointed or even a little lost when we quit something.
Yeah.
Those feelings are natural, but don't let them hold you back.
Don't beat yourself up.
Exactly. It's about learning from the experience, adjusting your course, and moving on.
And sometimes quitting something we've put a lot of effort into can actually be the most courageous thing we can do.
It's about having the confidence to trust our instincts and to believe that we deserve to be doing work that lights us up.
Work that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been so insightful. I'm already starting to see quitting in a whole new light.
That's great to hear.
It's not the enemy. It's a tool, a powerful tool that we can use to shape our lives and careers.
Absolutely. And it's about remembering that we have a choice. We don't have to stay stuck in situations that aren't serving us.
We have the power to walk away and create something better.
Exactly.
Okay, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here, but I'm ready to get even more practical.
Okay, let's do it.
How can we take these ideas and actually apply them to our own lives?
Let's dive into some specific examples and actionable takeaways.
Sounds good. Let's get tactical. And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into the dip. I'm feeling ready to start strategically quitting my way to success.
That's the spirit. But I know it can be kind of tricky to put these ideas into practice.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about it, but actually doing it is a whole other ballgame.
Totally. So let's break it down and get practical.
Okay, let's say you're feeling stuck in a job or a project or even a relationship. What are some red flags that it might be time to quit?
Well, we've already touched on this a bit, but lack of measurable progress is a big one.
Right, if you're putting in the effort but not seeing any results.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a sign that you might be spinning your wheels in a cul-de-sac.
So it's time to step back and ask yourself, is this really worth it?
Exactly. And Godin suggests another really insightful question to ask yourself.
Okay, what is it?
He says, if I quit this task, will it increase my ability to get through the dip on something more important?
That's deep.
Sometimes we get so focused on one thing that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
We forget about our priorities.
Exactly. And he also encourages us to think about who we're trying to influence.
Right, like if you're dealing with a difficult boss who's never happy no matter what you do.
Yeah, that's a classic example if it's just one person. Your efforts might be better spent elsewhere.
But if you're trying to reach a larger market, like with a product or a service.
Then persistence can pay off big time.
Okay, so let's say you've identified a cul-de-sac in your life. What's the best way to actually go about quitting?
Well, first of all, don't just storm out in a blaze of glory,
No dramatic exits?
right? Be strategic about it.
Uh-huh.
Take some time to reflect on your goals and values, consider what you've learned from the experience, and make sure you have a plan for what you're going to do next.
So it's not just about quitting, it's about quitting with a purpose.
Exactly. And it's about making sure you're not just jumping from one frying pan into another fire.
I like that analogy.
And, Godin also talks about how you can sometimes make the world smaller.
Oh yeah, what does he mean by that?
Well, instead of trying to be everything to everyone, maybe you can find more success by focusing on a smaller niche.
So like if you're a musician and you're struggling to break into a huge genre,
Right? Maybe you could focus on building a dedicated following within a smaller subgenre.
and become like the go-to person for that specific style of music.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where your passion and skills can really shine.
Okay, so we've talked about the how-to of quitting, but I want to acknowledge that it can be scary.
It's not always easy.
It can feel like you're admitting defeat.
Totally. And that's why self-compassion is so important.
Yeah, we need to be kind to ourselves.
Absolutely. It's okay to feel sad or disappointed or even a little lost when you quit something. Those feelings are normal.
You're human.
Exactly. But don't let those feelings hold you back.
Don't dwell on the negative.
Right. It's about learning from the experience and moving on.
And sometimes quitting something you've put your heart and soul into can actually be the bravest, most powerful thing you can do.
It shows that you're not afraid to make tough choices. and that you're committed to living a life that's true to yourself.
I love that this conversation has been so eye-opening. It's really shifted my perspective on quitting.
That's fantastic to hear.
It's not about giving up. It's about making choices that empower you to live a better life.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that you have the power to create the life you want.
It's about taking control.
And sometimes that means walking away from things that are no longer serving you.
Well said. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the dip, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
I love it. What's the challenge?
Take some time this week to reflect on your own life and work.
Okay.
Are there any cul-de-sacs you need to escape? Any dips you need to lean into? What can you quit today to free yourself up to become the best in your world?
That's a great challenge. And remember, quitting isn't about giving up on your dreams. It's about making smart choices that empower you to achieve those dreams in a way that's sustainable and fulfilling.
That's right. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
We'll see you next time for another exploration of ideas that can change your life.